Today we're going to look at the firmware 2.5 version for the Panasonic G9, and even though it adds one function, I think this is an exciting addition and I want to show you why. Now before we get into the firmware, I want to show you this old SLR lens. So this is a Canon FD lens that was used for old film cameras. Here I have it with an adapter so I can mount it on the G9. But one nice thing about these older lenses is that they have long focus throws, which basically means if you make a small movement with your hand, it doesn't go from near to far very quickly. Now I'll explain why that's good as this video goes on, but let's take a quick look at how to install this software. And you don't necessarily have to read the screen, I'll just quickly walk you through the steps. You want to make sure that you format the card in the Panasonic G9, download the firmware, and put it onto that card. So obviously you'll have to put it into your computer. I'll put a link to the firmware in the description below. Make sure the battery is fully charged, and if it's not fully charged, the camera will tell you that, so you just want to make sure that you have a fully charged battery in there. And once you turn the camera on, it won't do anything automatically, so you have to hit the play button, which is located on the left-hand side, and it will prompt you to update the firmware, and you can just follow the steps. Once installed, you go to the menu item, the wrench with the C, down to where it says Lens Others, and on page 7 of 8, at the bottom you have Focus Ring Control. And here you have your three options. You have non-linear, and there's an explanation on the left, linear, and the set, which I'll explain in just a little bit. Now, unlike the old lenses, the newer lenses don't have limits on where you can stop and start. So in other words, you can continue to spin the focus ring around and around without stopping. So this is where the set option comes into play, and you have all these different degrees that you can set. So you have to think of these degrees as if they were in a circle. So if you set it to something like 180 degrees, if you were to put a mark on the lens and rotate it to the bottom from the top, that's how far it would go from near to far. For example, if I set it to 90 degrees, you can follow my thumb. If it's on the side, if I want to go to the limits, I want to bring it up to the top, and that would be 90 degrees. Using linear, you want to focus on how far your hand is moving. And you don't necessarily have to mark up your lens, but again, if you were to put a mark on your lens and you chose 360 degrees, that would make a full turn to get to the other end of the focus scale. So on the Panasonic, it would be the icon of the mountains over to the side with the flower. With nonlinear, it's harder to control that. Of course, you could put on focus peaking and look at the image and see what's in focus. But with linear, you can make a nice smooth movement because you know how far you have to move your hand. With nonlinear, you'll have to rely on the screen, and that is where distance makes much more sense than the speed factor that you have to use with nonlinear. In other words, if you're not at a consistent speed, you may actually go past what you want to focus on, or it may take a lot longer to get to what you want to focus on, or you may start heading in that direction and then you'll speed up once you get closer. So as you can see, distance is much more reliable. Now, as far as the set option, that all depends on you, whichever is easiest for you. Here I'm setting it to 90, and even though I'm not going to the ends of the focus scale, this means I have to turn less to reach the two things that I want to focus on. So even though I'm not rotating my hand a full 90 degrees, that just means I have less movement to get to the other focus point. And here I'm going to set it to 180. I haven't changed anything in this scene, and I can still continue to go back and forth between the two focus points, and on the scale they haven't changed. But now, because the full range is 180 degrees, now I have to make a larger movement with my hand to focus on these two different points. And just to be clear, this doesn't change the distance on the focus scale. Here they are side by side and they're in the same area. Just to reiterate what I just said, the distance from one object to the other doesn't change on that scale, and that's even when you're choosing nonlinear. But as you just saw in those examples on the focus scale, there aren't any markings on there, so it's harder to do that with nonlinear as opposed to just looking at the lens and seeing how far you have to move it. And that's the benefit of adding something like the linear focus. As I mentioned earlier, you can have a smoother focus pull because you know how far you have to move. Even if you had best intentions with speed, with nonlinear, it's very hard to hit those two focus points with a smooth motion. And then of course the other thing is how far you want that focus throw to be. Of course, this all depends on your personal preference, but generally a larger focus throw is better because any small movements on a short focus throw will move it potentially past the thing that you're trying to focus on, so you can get a much smoother movement if you have a longer focus throw. I hope that made sense. Any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I am happy that they added this function to the Panasonic G9. I will mention which lenses this affects in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.